Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Eric Roberge, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about building your career, your business, and your life with intention, all with this backdrop of personal financial planning, which is your expertise and background. So I'm really excited to explore this together. And I really like, as we were preparing for this episode, that word intention, I think is just super, super important. So regardless of what we're talking about, I am always advocating for people to have more intention behind what they're doing. Don't just kind of go with the flow. Don't just kind of see where things take you, but have purpose, have meaning, have intention. And I think we'll have better outcomes for ourselves, for our families, for our workplace, for our communities. So I'm excited to unpack this and explore this together with you today. As we get started, I wanted to share Eric's bio with everybody. Eric Roberge is the founder of Beyond Your Hammock, a wealth management firm helping professionals in their 30s and 40s use money as a tool to design a life they love now and in the future. Eric has 2 decades of experience in the financial industry and founded BYH to help professional couples grow their wealth mindfully. His unique planning style provides his clients with custom strategies and an organized framework within which they make smart money decisions and build more wealth, and delivers financial advice in a way that honors their goals and values without interfering with their busy lives, thriving careers, and growing families. I could go on. You have so much in your background. You've accomplished so many things. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
The only thing to add there is really my clients get from me what I experience in my personal life. So I share what I go through and how I think about things personally with my wife and my daughter, and deliver that as an example of, hey, here's how we thought about this. What do you think? And it really helps us as peers, client and advisor, work together to really make life better.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's start there. We mentioned the word intention, how important that is as you're striving to build your career, your business, your financial plan, how you live your life, generally speaking. How do you go about making mindful choices about how you spend your resources of time, money, and energy? It's all finite. I think we all sometimes think we're superheroes and think we're invincible and think we can continue to add more and more and more to our plates. But the reality is, usually when we make one choice to do one thing, usually it means we're restricting ourselves in another area with regards to time, money, and energy, because those are finite resources. And so how do we go about prioritizing and making those mindful choices in a way that's strategic so that we can get to that successful career, that successful business, that successful life?
I think it starts with asking more questions than you have answers to, and not assuming that you know already what the answer is. And so what I mean by that is, a lot of times people will come to me and say, hey, there's this really great opportunity. I'm going to buy this house. It's a $2 million house outside of Boston. It's great. Should I do it? I look at them like a deer in headlights and say, I don't know. Let's dig in. What are your intentions? What are you trying to optimize for? What are the other complicating factors that we're considering other than just you're here, now you're going to be there? And you start to dig in, and the conversation opens up so much broader than housing. It becomes life and career and family, and just keeps compounding from there. And that really helps us look at things from a 360-degree perspective before making a decision that could change everything.
Right. And a lot of those decisions really are these big, huge decisions. Sometimes they're smaller, but there are ripple effects of all the decisions that we make. And so really starting with that intention, starting with that purpose clear in your mind, I think is always going to be really, really important. And simply just being mindful about the choices you're making and mindful of the consequences of the choices that you're making. So whether you want to invest in a piece of real estate, whether you want to take a new job offer that's going to, perhaps require you to either change, shift in career, or maybe move to a different part of the country or whatever, like all of these things have other impacts on your life that you just need to be aware of and not ignorant to. If you're aware of them, then you can start to parse them out and explore. And like you said, I really like how you said approach it with some humility, and that you don't really know. Ask more questions and don't assume you have the answers. And that's a hard thing to do, especially in a society, like when we're talking about wealth management and building wealth and building career. We live in a society largely that points to, bigger is better, and have that bigger, nicer house, have a bigger career, higher position, higher status, higher title. And sometimes those are good things, but sometimes they aren't congruent with our other goals that we have in our lives. And if we just kind of accept, this kind of general societal value, or this what we feel like may be pressed upon us, something that we should be striving for, when in fact we don't actually care that much about it, or it's going to be contradictory to other values and other aspects of our lives that we find really, really important, then that's where you find yourself in your 40s looking at your life, wondering, how did I get here? Where am I going? I think that's one of the biggest causes of midlife crisis that people have, because they kind of bought in to this narrative of like what is important without really critically examining it, without really making sure it aligns with their values. And then all of a sudden, they're in their 40s or whenever it happens. It can happen at any time, really. But you find yourself sitting there feeling a bit stuck. Maybe you're in that mortgage for this house, that you're over leveraged on. Maybe, you took a job that now you hate, because you just thought that getting a promotion in and of itself was a good thing, even though, that wasn't the best fit for you, or whatever, like whatever the thing is. I think we find ourselves in that trap often, unless we really can be mindful and intentional about these types of big decisions that we face. And if we get better at making those decisions in a mindful way, pretty soon we can start to see that we can build that muscle and start to do it in all aspects of our lives. And not that you need to like sit there and stew on every last little decision. Where am I going to go eat today? And like spend a half an hour trying to figure it out. Like, I'm not suggesting that, but just like being present, being mindful, being intentional about what you're doing, all of a sudden it can be something that can feed into your daily life, not just the big life decisions. It can feed into how you're making what may seem as fairly innocuous decisions, but will in the aggregate have impact on what you do, and like how you are with, say, your daughter, like you said, or your spouse, or your significant other, or a coworker, or whatever the case may be.
So true. I mean, there's so many ways I could go with just that commentary there. One of the things that I was thinking about before, as I was preparing for this conversation, was my clients who, they're in these high-powered careers, and a lot of them are in sales or they're in healthcare, and the plan that they have to make in order to achieve their career goals in January 1 of any year is a lot different than the plan that they should be making from a personal perspective. What I mean by that is, of course, the salesperson wants to hit it big. Like, here are these lofty goals, and we're going to gun for the stars. And they're not successful unless they are just geared towards max.
Right.
And then they bring that same mindset into their personal setting outside of their career. And we're trying to build a sustainable, keyword sustainable financial plan that has a high probability of long-term success. You can't use that same mindset, because you're going to blow up the plan, because a lot of the times when you try for these lofty goals, you fail, and that's okay. Because if you didn't try high, you wouldn't even get here. But when it comes to your family, if you fail, you can't just explain why you're on the street. And so it really matters how you're switching gears as to the business person making decisions versus the family person making decisions, and then generally life decisions.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about that sustainability piece, which is super important. Again, kind of as a general life principle, I'm a big believer in moderation and moderation in all things, and then look for sustainability in whatever decisions you're making. And sometimes continual growth is achievable, but sometimes it's not. Um, and so being mindful and intentional about our limited time, money, and energy around sustainable growth in our career, in our business, in our life with that intention is going to be really, really important. So, from a financial planning standpoint, let's talk a little bit more about foolproofing that financial plan that can then lead into these various aspects of our lives. What the topic for today isn't, work-life balance. I actually like the term life work harmony, or using the word integration, but they're all connected, they're all interconnected. And so having that foolproof financial plan, I think, is going to be really, really important for people who want to find overall life success and happiness and contentment. So how do we go about creating that foolproof financial plan?
I think it starts with a structure. You have to have a structure within which you're going to make these decisions. Otherwise, it's just an either or every time something comes up. And it's really important to have some heuristics that you follow regardless. So, for example, there's a couple things that, regardless of how much money people make, I love it. I love percentages because it doesn't matter how much you make. You can just use percentages to fit the puzzle. Costs toward housing, savings rate for future, right? There are a couple of things that we really key in on, like cost towards housing. I mean, we love 20%. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance, 20%, maybe 25% of gross income. Long-term investments, saving to long-term investments, 25% is pretty much a sweet spot for those making, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year in household income. And if you can hit those two things, everything else is gravy. It's choice. You can do whatever you want with it, really. When it comes down to it, after you pay your taxes and your benefits, of course. And so if you have the heuristics that you want to make sure that you are always locking in, you can spin off of those. But if you never have anything that is really cemented in, everything is a variable, and it's almost impossible to make choices that are compounding in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. And speak more to that having that framework in place, so that it is compounding in the right direction. What are some of those factors that we can think about? We may not be at that point where we're like 4, 5, 6, 7K, 700K kind of household income, but regardless of where we might find ourselves, we need to be thinking about those principles of compounding interest and making sure that we're building our wealth in a meaningful way, in a purpose-driven way. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that everybody should be doing is building their balance sheet, just so they can see with their own eyes on paper or on a screen where their assets are, where their liabilities are, and what their net worth looks like right now. Not to compare to anybody else, just to say, here's a starting point, right? And more net worth does equal more choice on paper. And we want to make sure that we are feeding the right buckets along the way. So you have your net worth. It could be zero, it could be $1 million, it could be more. And then you look at your cash flow, which is the other piece of the financial foundation. Your income comes in. How does it come in? Is it salary? Is it commission? Is it super variable? Is it consistent? And then what goes out on a normal basis, right? If you have those two things in place, one of the mechanisms, the cash flow, feeds the balance sheet, whether it's paying off debt or growing your cash for a short-term expense like a down payment, or it feeds your investments that are then compounding for 30 years down the road. It's all interconnected, like you said about before. So we need to keep that in mind when making these decisions. Do we need liquidity right now? If so, how much cash do we need for emergencies? Like I said, for short-term expenses that are bigger than the normal cash flow can pay for in a month. We need to have that set aside in cash. We need to have it in banks, FDIC coverage, very safe, very liquid. And then For anything that is not in that bucket of emergency reserves or short-term spending, you have to ask yourself, why is it in cash? Because there is a cash drag. Even though cash is paying 5% right now, long-term it pays 1-2% at most. And the stock market, generally equities, will pay 8-10% over time. So we have to optimize the cash for growth if it's not being used for the next 5+ years. And that really helps with the long-term play. So you can live powerfully today, but also live powerfully tomorrow because you have the assets to back you up.
Yeah. So you've already started to speak to it a little bit, but let's explore a little bit more, what do financially successful people do differently than, others, and not, I don't want to be demeaning or dismissive of people. I don't even know, you would know what the percentages of people in the US who live paycheck to paycheck. It's a super high percentage, and the level of consumer debt is so high. Like, people are struggling just to get by. And so I don't want to be dismissive of those real challenges that people are facing, especially as we've seen inflation and other challenges related to the pandemic, et cetera. But, there are habits, I think, that financially successful people tend to establish and stay kind of consistent with over time that can make a difference, even if you're starting from a place, of basically paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. And believe me, when I started my business, I was very much paycheck to paycheck, if not less than that. And so it's just a gradual growth over time. And I've been very cognizant of how things shift, how my mental state has shifted. And therefore I can apply that when I talk to people at all different income levels. But when it comes down to it, people that are good with money, I mean, it's some of this stuff is really seemingly obvious. Spend less than you make. Always save money every year into assets that are going to grow for you. Those two things alone will help you. And more generally speaking, I think they're making more decisions that have two-way doors than one-way doors. And if you're not familiar, and you probably are, but just the decision that says you can't back out of that decision because you made a commitment that is unbackoutable, right? Yeah. If you're continually making those decisions, and those are fine once in a while, but if every decision you make is a one-way door, it does lead you down to that cascading hallway where you can't turn around and you find yourself in a place that you didn't ever think or intend to be in. But if you can make decisions that can be returned, essentially, then you have a bit more flexibility and you can try something out. And if you don't like it, you pull back. But if you like it, you can build on that. That's really important when it comes down to it.
What I'm hearing is a lot of what you're suggesting. It comes down to asking the right questions, being intentional and mindful about the decisions that we're making, and then having, an awareness of your values, your intentions, and building a structure around that to help you make the decisions that you're going to need to make. Again, in this case, we're talking a little bit more specifically about financial planning, but these principles apply to all decision making in all aspects of our lives. And so if we can come to it with some humility, some intellectual humility, come to it with an assumption that we don't already know what the best thing is, that we're going to explore, that we're going to try to find things that are congruent with our values, that is really the best practice in trying to build our career, our business, our life with intention. That there's not some prescription, I guess, is what I'm suggesting. That there's principles that can be applied that can help us be more successful. There are habits that we can adopt that can help us be more successful. But ultimately, it depends, right? It depends on you. It depends on your family, your dynamic. It depends on your goals. It depends on, all the things you want to achieve in life. And depending on what those goals are, it leads to other types of decisions that you might want to make. So you might try to reverse engineer, like, what's your goal, reverse engineer that back to the decisions that are going to get you to that goal. That's kind of how I'm understanding what you're saying. Does that make sense? And is that accurate?
It does. It is very accurate. I think one other additional piece is and it's the word that we haven't brought up yet, is risk management. And a lot of times when you're working in a career and you've been successful there and you're making good money, it's more about not making mistakes than it is about picking the right choice. And so if you're looking at it from, let's not make mistakes here, that's a good place to be. You can relax a little bit and just let things go and stop trying to optimize everything. And I speak to myself here too, because I love to optimize things, but sometimes you don't need to optimize. You've already made good decisions and they've compounded, and now you can actually reset your brain and say, all right, now I have this baseline that is very sustainable. Let's go forward and maybe not defensive, because that sounds a little bit boring here, but not so offensive that you could make a big mistake that could just devastate everything you've built up so far.
Yeah, well said. Well, this has just been a really great conversation, Eric. A good overview, I think, of some of the principles that we should be considering and keeping in mind, and really just a starting point, right? Ultimately, what really needs to happen is you need to be having conversations with your partners, with your spouse, have a conversation with a financial planner, start the conversations today so that you can start to put the frameworks in place, have the kind of the guidelines in place, and start to make the types of decisions that are going to help you achieve the goals that you have in the long run. Eric, before I let you go, in the last few minutes that we have together, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Sure. Yeah, the best place to find me is the website, beyondyourhammock.com. That's going to give you access to a blog and podcast episodes and how to work with us, who we work with, just all the information you ever wanted to know about Beyond Your Hammock and us, the team, is right there. As far as the topic itself, I think it's an ongoing conversation. There is no financial plan that can be put on paper and called done. It is very much flexible. It is a living, breathing conversation that you continue to have over time, knowing that your perspective today and your goals and priorities now are going to be different than they are in 5 years, 10 years, and certainly 30 years from now. And just look back at the last 10 years where you were then and try to imagine, did you think you were going to be here? No, you could not possibly have imagined. There's too many variables, too many assumptions.
Yeah.
And so it's not a right or wrong. It's just keeping an open mind, having these conversations, and again, ask more questions. What don't I know? I don't know here.
And that's good advice all the way around. I think everyone should be asking more questions, listen more than you speak, have intellectual humility, challenge your assumptions. I think that's really great life advice generally. So, Eric, thank you so much. It's just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Eric and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.